Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Ryan from Exoderma.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Lou from Exoderma.
Today, we're going to be talking about meditating and diagnostics. Now, that sounds weird to combine, but by that specifically, I mean a person meditating and then a piece of equipment that goes on top of your head that's able to measure your brain waves and give you some kind of like analytical, like diagnostic feedback on those particular waves. It's a really complex topic. Again, we're talking about meditating and brain caps. So before we get to the brain caps, I actually want to touch on meditating a little bit because we need to sort of define what meditating would be from an overall context and why we would want to measure that. So Lou, it's your turn. How do you define meditating, or what is it to you?
So yeah, there's so many various meditating techniques and ways to achieve a state of meditation. The most familiar one to me that I usually have practiced is I forget the name right now. It's escaping me, but it's pretty much focusing on one certain aspect of my physiology, whether it be my breathing or something that I can feel about my own body, my orientation in space, the gravity, the pressure of I don't know, my body against my seat. Anything that I can think of. Just give me 1 second. Hey, what's well? I'll definitely say that I'm mostly familiar with. It's like a meditation where you just think of one thing and you try to focus on that one thing that you just think of, and you don't deviate from that thought. So if I'm sitting down and I close my eyes, I just start thinking about my breathing and what it feels like to breathe, what the sensation of the air going through my nostrils and out my, you know, esophagus and all that stuff. Not esophagus, larynx. And then what that process continues to feel like, right? Because eventually what happens is my thoughts start to come back and it'll start pulling me away from that concentration and either out into, what I have to do later or what I did yesterday or whatever random thought pops into my head. So I try to become aware of that I'm leaving the concentration state. And then I try to pull myself back into focusing on my breathing or whatever physiological state I have. So that to me is in essence what a meditation exercise can be like. And you can choose to focus on so many different things. It doesn't have to be your breathing. You can just open your eyes and look at a specific object out in space and just stay focused on that object. And that could be another meditative exercise. Or just listen to a sound, right? Some sound that's occurring. Could be a bell tone or some humming or any type of relaxing music. So yeah, those are the various types of different, I guess, exercises using different senses that you can use to meditate, sort of. I'm sure there are different other types of meditation exercises, but for
Yeah,
now, I
there are
guess we could stick to those.
there are quite a few. I tend to not jump into like the finer subtleties of and I probably should. Like, I haven't studied into the people who I guess we would say originated meditating or some version of it in some context. And so, I have like read snippets here and there, and I utilize certain techniques from like the trials of things that I've done. Um, but like from like I guess like a 250,000 foot view, like what we're looking at here, for me, like what I see meditation as is sort of this like when something bad happens in your life, people mostly generally think of maybe another person that they want to talk to, or they think of like something they want to do to get rid of that feeling, or they want to, and it could be any level of bad thing. And the issue is that we go to some external thing for like to solve for that bad problem that's internal ultimately. And for me, meditating is sort of, number one is recognizing that all those problems are generally internal. It's our perspective. And number two is getting into that state intentionally. And that is sort of where those techniques and sequences come into. So it's like getting into this state of, we call compassion. And that's like, when you look at, like, they do the mindfulness research and the studies where they see the compassion part of the brain turns on when these people who are really experienced in meditation go to meditate, because they're able to connect with that sense of collective. That's the collective overall, you know, and that's sort of like the theory behind it. But like I said, for me, it's meditation is really about the recognition of the internal and sort of like the sequences towards getting control over the internal. I think last time, maybe in a previous conversation, I called it monkey chatter or your monkey mind. And that is one iteration of it where, like, you have a voice telling you to do these things or saying specific things, and it's not really your voice. It's just kind of there. And mindfulness goes into that as well. So it's like sort of this all-encompassing process that has to do with the self and how in the relationship to everything else. And that's sort of how I think about it. But what really blows me away is that it was like voodoo for probably hundreds of years for a lot of cultures. Meditating, I mean, you have praying obviously, but they didn't look at praying the same. So like now we're at a point where our technology is where we can actually measure the changes. I think they use EEGs for those brainwave caps, right? We can measure the changes of the brain real time with equipment at home to actually see whether or not you're improving in what it is that you're trying to improve in. So like the first stages of mindfulness and meditating are the ability, like what you're talking about, to control your focus in a way. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all, because like I struggle with this all the time. I've only been meditating for 3 months, I would say consistently my entire life, and it's been these last 3 months. And I do it every morning at 8 a.m. and I've missed some few days. But what happened was, it was sort of like this process where it was getting used to sitting down for a long amount of time. So getting used to stillness. And then it was watching my brain just go in circles and go through all this crazy information, and then slowly being able to quiet it for the physiological senses. And then whenever it starts to pop back up, quiet it again, and then eventually allow it to happen. It's like I'm in the stage where I imagine I'll be for a few years, where I'm trying to figure out how to focus down my brain. And I will tell you, an amazing way for me to do that would be for me to be able to measure my brainwaves. So do you have any let's talk about brainwaves, I guess, and this technology. What's your perspective on it?
So I think that yeah, brainwaves have a correlation to what your internal state of mind is like. So when you're anxious or when you're stressed out, or there's any type of internal state that you can identify as stressful, your brainwaves will be of a certain pattern compared to when you are relaxed and when you are enjoying yourself, or you have something that is pleasant. And I mean, that kind of makes sense, right? Since the brain is the thing that's processing all the information, processing stressful information versus relaxing information. I would imagine that there would be a difference between those two things. And also, since that type of stress can lead to alterations in your heartbeat and your heart rate and your breathing patterns. So it seems that those experiences have an overall effect on your entire physiology. Why not your brain patterns as well? So that's what leads me to believe that is definitely the case. And I'm pretty sure that if we read some studies, we'd also be looking at scientific evidence of that.
Okay, and so you touched on something that I think is super important with this, would be I guess they're called autonomic responses, or the parasympathetic responses. Those are two different things. I forgot which one it is. Either way, it's one of those things in which your physiological state or your psychological state affects your physiological state. And what you're saying is that I'm sure we have studies that you think we have studies that actually would show that, or some kind of relative correlation between the.
So like psychological / physiological correlations.
Yes. Like how there have been studies that say, oh, if this person is in a specific psychological state, then they're likely, or they're maybe, and they also have this thing, there's a higher, I don't know, I'm not sure what the connection would be. if you pulled a whole bunch of health data and a whole bunch of psychological state data, do you think there would be some correlation between the psychological state and the health data?
Yeah, exactly. Then the question is kind of a chicken or the egg question, where you ask which one came first. Did the psychological state come first, or did the physiological state come first? So yeah, it's interesting to think about that as well. But nevertheless, they both affect each other. So it doesn't really, I guess, in essence, matter. As long as you can change one, the other one will also change.
So, and that's like a big theory. I guess that's the big thing. I guess the movement with meditation is that if you can get in the right headspace, then general reality, or your the way you interpret reality, will change. And so your health will probably change, your heart rate, things of that nature. And then I guess for me, it's always been the reverse, right? Where I think I go for a physiological state change before the psychological, and it's like, I'm not sure if it's ever worked out. I don't think that's worked out for me personally. Some people may be able to go to the gym and that's how their psychological state changes. But I'm learning, at least for me, that meditation seems to be a big power in changing the psychological state. And so, wow.
Yeah, man, the psychology that, so for example, I also have this idea that we have this subconscious tension in our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has it.
Mm-hmm.
It could be related to our subconscious back there, just kind of ruminating about death, or any other trauma that has happened to us, or just any social anxiety that maybe is present whenever we're out there with other people, or any situation that you find yourself in. Subconsciously, you're tensing up somewhere in your body. So to me, the meditation is what helps me release that tension, and makes me realize that there is a tension there. Like there's a tension in my neck, or there's a tension in my jaw. Maybe when I'm out in public, someone says something and I want to react and say something, but I clench my throat muscles or whatever to not sound stupid or sound whatever it is that I want to judge myself by. So yeah, so we're always receiving all this information, this input, and that's causing us to subconsciously change our physiology, our state of being, which then alters our psychology, and then it's a feedback loop between both of them. So if we're not able to reset one of them, it keeps accumulating, and then that leads to, I think, illness and just overall. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I completely agree with everything you said, and on such a level that it would be hard to fully explain on this podcast. I'm not going to, but I completely agree. Like it's such, so, okay. So jump in. Would you say that, as long as we can get in the way of, like I said, disrupt one of those processes, or at least give some kind of reflective feedback on one of those processes that's in some context subjective, then that gives the person the platform to potentially elevate themselves from either psychologically or physiologically. That is such so why do you think that, I don't really know the statistics of people who actually practice meditation, or even like do it regularly, like what if they use it as an actual tool, or what that would be, but I know that it's not a commonly used thing. Do you have any like perspectives on why you think it isn't something that's widely used? Or if it should be widely used, or if there's a way, like, if technology will do that, these brainwave scanners.
Yeah, I'll get into the technology side of it, which I think is kind of maybe going to help it. But I don't know. I think that people might be turned off to it because of the reward effort ratio. So it takes a lot of effort to be there sitting down. It's maybe even harder than the gym for some people to just sit there and be with their own thoughts and themselves and do that type of exercise. And once they're done with that, right, they do like 5 minutes, which 5 minutes is a lot. 5 minutes is a really long time for meditating, right? And then they get out of it, and then they're like, okay, why am I not healthy now? Why am I not feeling great? Why am I not amazing yet?
You're right. That's so true.
But it would take months and months and months, or years of practicing, to start seeing benefits and actually, doing something to your body.
I think before we jump into the technology part of it, I think a large part of the of what you're saying also is that so like if you assume that humans are just this is from a simple mechanical model. I'm not gonna jump into soul and emotion, all this, but let's just talk about neurochemicals, and there are hundreds of them. And if you assume that humans are just this really complex combinations of neurochemicals or neurotransmitters, then we would say that there's probably like there is a specific balance, right? This gets into this whole conversation of where like right now a lot of our research points to depression and anxiety being imbalances in neurochemicals and neurotransmitters, right? And and what this whole mindfulness thing brings into context is where like is it possible, like how much can it affect it? How much can someone intentionally trying to work on something affect it? And because we get back to this whole short-term feedback issue where it's like, if you put in this effort, you're not going to see this reward immediately. And so you have to really be looking for the reward. Like you have to, and for me, I'm going to go ahead and say like, I'm a really hyperactive person when it comes to my thoughts, talking, moving. I'm always moving. And so for me, sitting still is hard. But like, man, where was I going with that? I was like, I was sitting still, short-term feedback. Oh yeah, I have to vocalize the feedback, vocalize the reward. When I finish meditating, I have to actually look for some kind of physiological state difference. And I feel it. It's like a tingling in your fingertip. And that's where you can do your breathing sequences, right? Where if you're looking really for some kind of short-term feedback in your physiological state, then that's where something like a breathing sequence will come in, where you actually practice these hyperventilative like techniques, and they really do cause chemical releases. And it's like, it just like gets to this whole prospect of where you can control your body, and it's really this matter of sort of consciously and intentionally trying to find what that reward, identify that reward, and then saying, like for me again, I say, I feel like I recognize the stimulation is different. So before I go into the meditation, I'm generally all over the place. When I finish, my brain is like an arrow. I can't even explain it, and I don't like right now. I'm not like that. Right now, I'm all over the place. But if I was to hypothetically meditate before I got onto a podcast or got into a meeting, which I never do, I never thought about it, I would probably be a lot less talkative. But yeah, man, I think it's just I think it's a lot for people when it comes to like trying to, it's like, if you want progress, you have to sort of identify the reward yourself. So that's like the thing with meditation, which is really hard because it's like, you have to like, yeah, it gets really into this complex thing of where, just about awareness. Anyway, that's a long topic, another conversation that we kind of covered actually last podcast. Now we're going to jump over into this, how meditating in awareness or this compassion or being able to measure the relaxed state versus this tense state that Lou's talking about, and using an EEG waves. Now, before they used, I guess, what would be the difference between an MRI in this context versus a brainwave? Is there an accuracy difference? Is it a different application?
Yeah, so before we get into that, I want to be a little tinfoil hat wearer. So I want to do a little bit of conspiracy right now theory.
That's all I do, bro.
So yeah, aside from the fact that I think, you know, it's the reward effort ratio, I think that also there's a big effect from big pharma and all these other companies that push towards the faster solution instead of the longer, more effective solution. So they give you pills to rebalance your chemicals, which is the same end goal, but through different means, because, you know, it'll make them money, but you can't really charge. I mean, I guess you can have meditation centers and
they exist.
Yeah, but like, it's not as lucrative as selling millions and millions of pills and actually never healing anyone, so that they keep on using it. But yeah, I don't know. That was just, I just had to say that. I just had to put that on record.
That's not a tinfoil hat. That's reality. If you were to compare we'll call it the physiological feedback loop and the psychological feedback loop between modern civilization and any other civilization besides modern civilization, so we're going to say the last 300 years, what we're doing would be atrocious, every single part of it. Like, I would much rather put Coke in Coke. Like, we could still sell Coke, like cocaine and Coke, and it'd probably still be better than what we're doing now. I'm just playing. That's fucked that way.
Yeah, I just have to say that because if I have any semblance of appearing sane, they'll come and kill me.
So you're saying tinfoil, yeah.
Yeah.
My conspiracy theories don't run that far. I'm not that important, bro. I'm working on a man bun. They don't care about me.
The other thing I wanted to mention before we get to your actual question was I read this meditation book by a guy that was he was like a monk or like a yogi or some type of like very meditative professional, and he wrote a book explaining all the exercises and like all the techniques that he used to get to his states, and in his pictures he would show him like self-piercing his face, you know, doing like these crazy things that he was able to control part of his autonomous system, mm-hmm. and somehow get to those layers of his neurochemistry, let's say.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally believe that people, if they practice enough and they do it for a long enough time, they can gain control of a lot of. I don't even know what the limit is, to be honest. Like, you might be able to control as far as you're able to practice and as much as you're able to like focus.
Yep. I would say the biggest examples we have would be elite athletes and monks. Like
Yeah,
these are high levels of focus for long. And now they're not really meditating in a sense, but there are like it, I imagine the future athletes will. I imagine like these athletes, because there's a whole bunch of brain training technology coming out as well for athletes, and where you would consider it meditating while you're practicing your sport. And so it's really about this whole mindfulness and intention behind your movement. And so it's like,
yeah. Have
yeah,
you also heard of Wim Hof? You ever
yes, I
heard
love
of him?
Wim Hof. The breathing is where I learned
Again,
it. I
crazy
learned
amazing the fact that he went into the experiments and they gave
Jesus.
everyone poison, and his immune system was just like, nah, I'm all right, no thanks.
Isn't that crazy that you can actually control your metabolic system just by breathing?
Yeah,
Just by controlling your breathing, you can control your metabolic system. And that's like mind blowing. Like he ran across like what Mount Kilimanjaro or something like that with just some shorts on or something.
yeah, he's ridiculous. So yeah, his mind is crazy. It's crazy strong. There's just something that he has been doing that helps him get to those states. But yeah, so now going to your question about how can we help people achieve those particular states with technology. First of all, I think that breathing, like we just touched upon right now, is one of the most essential, important things. Like we talk about how water is so essential and vital to our systems, but oxygen is even more essential and vital because you can't stop breathing for a few minutes. So a lot of people in modern society have very shallow breathing. Their lung muscles or the muscles around their lungs and thorax have, atrophied pretty much, and
Mhm.
they're getting very small exchange of fresh oxygen and releasing of carbon dioxide from their system, which increases the toxicity of their inner environment.
This man, so they've done like studies on cadavers where a lot of modern cadavers from humans are losing the transverse abdominis. So your transverse abdominis is this like big corset type muscular structure around your, connecting your thorax to your pelvis. And a lot of these cadavers are losing it because it's for transverse plane, it's for rotation, right? And there's a couple reasons there's theories behind it. One of the theories is lordosis and kyphosis. So just overarched shoulders and then the shrinking down of your pec minors and just collapsing around your rib cage, just closing your thorax, your rib cage. Another one is like you're putting even more pressure on your lower back. So it's like this combination of things where it's like one muscular structure goes out, and now we got breathing is an issue, we got back pain, and of course there are some other pathologies associated. But the TVA is a super important muscle, and cadavers are losing it. And now when you say losing it, let's talk about what atrophy. Let's talk about what Lou said a second ago. Atrophy, losing it, literally means like tissue has like sort of like this adaptation mechanism where whenever you apply more stress to it, more load to it, it gets stronger, it becomes more, it adapts better, right? And this is all tissue in the human body. If you do not load a tissue, you do not put any kind of resistance on it, then it disappears. You literally lose it. And that's what they're seeing in a lot of cadavers, which is super crazy that I never really thought about. I mean, I know breathing's super important, but you can see like the whole civilization. There are so
Yeah,
many people
man.
who have breathing issues. Like,
Of course, and like you mentioned, it's a whole chain of events that then get unleashed that mess you up even more. It's compounding effects.
man, and then you're getting, benzos to manage it. And then
That's yeah. It's a little band-aid on top of a just a cut right down the center of your stomach.
we're not saying that meditating is going to make you be able to ignore the cut in your stomach from your ulcer that you just got removed or whatever, however they handle ulcers nowadays. Yeah, it's that you're better able to contend with it. That would probably be a better way. It's like you could potentially maybe block it out if you got to that level, but at least in the beginning, you'd be able to contend with it. That's super interesting, man. Like okay, all right. So on to the getting people to the States.
Yeah, so the first thing I think we have to work on is get people to become aware of their breathing and the importance of it, of breathing correctly and doing it as a mindful exercise, as an intentional exercise, probably every day. And so we can have these systems hooked up to your, I mean, I guess this would be more like, this is like a crazy setup, but You have like those oxygen type masks that people can see what the volume of oxygen is coming out of them. So you could put it up on a screen, and people would have a readout of how much oxygen they are outputting, so that they could consciously try to breathe in and exhale as much as possible.
So this is where my suit, I think the suit is sort of a cool concept in the sense that I had to take a lie detector test before when I was younger, and they wrap a band around your rib cage to measure the expansion of your lungs. And so it's not that like there is a certain order of magnitude you wouldn't be able to measure any kind of expansion on the lungs, the rib cage, but there's a certain order of magnitude that you would be able to. So I know that I agree that the solution is that I really do wonder. So you're actually saying, so two things here. One is actually achieving the range of motion within the actual structures to have good respiratory function. And the other one is actually measuring the efficiency of your anabolic system and converting oxygen, carbon dioxide, et cetera. And those are two parts that I guess not, I mean, man, you think you want to do that while meditating. Actually, like that would be like a diagnostic for.
Yeah, it could be a open eye meditation where you could just, I guess, provide very basic feedback so it's not too distracting. A green light and a red light. Yeah, so the green light says that you're breathing deeply and exhaling to the proper amount. And then if you go below a certain threshold and you're shallow breathing, it'll turn to red. So it alerts you to like, oh, pick up the breathing, get more oxygen in your system.
Wow. Do you think maybe there's like a way to like a miniature seismometer or something that you could strap to a strap and you could actually detect the noise that would come from? Maybe that's too much. That's probably too crazy. I'm just trying to think of some way where you'd be able to detect, like, because if it's just at a simple level of feedback for breathing efficiency, just be able to give someone a band that's, $25 or $50 that they could put on and they could like, literally they could meditate or they could use it while they're running on a treadmill. So that way they're controlling their lung expansion and actually breathing intently, or intentionally.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's so much stuff I never thought about. Okay, so you're talking about, so psychological state and physiological state is literally giving them feedback, is what you're saying. And all right, so breathing was the first one.
Yeah, it's bringing into awareness something that they've been ignoring.
Yes.
That is essential to the task at hand.
It's like it's there. This conversation of breathing will go down so many lines, but it's like he summed it up pretty well when he said breathing like supersedes water. I mean, that right there alone says how important it is. And I think it speaks more too, by the way, of the mechanical structure or slash function, which allows breathing to even take place. And the question of whether or not there is a efficient posture or efficient, I guess, sequence of breathing. And that's sort of where Wim Hof goes through. And like a lot of these, what they're called, like Prasanna or Prathana. There's another one, like these different meditation type practices, like the Indian ones. I think it's called Prasanna or something, where it's like this fire breathing, whatever.
Yeah, I don't want to pronounce it incorrectly, so I'm not going to say it.
Man, I'm used to the guy who if I wear a tin cap everywhere, man, we're good. Aluminum foil cap. But
aluminum foil, you've upgraded.
Aluminum foil, I've upgraded. Eventually, it's going to be a gold foil.
Gold.
You're like, hey, bro, don't question my conspiracies, all right? Hey, okay, so we've pretty much covered a large group of it. I mean, a pretty large portion of this. So just to digress back, I like going over what we talked about so far is meditation, sort of what that is for both of us, and the bridge of what that is, how we would actually measure something like that via breathing, via just, again, the EEG brainwave, like those things. Even combining those two things would be amazing. And then it really kind of speaks more to this physiological state, psychological state feedback loop, in which the goal is really to interject some kind of technology in between that, so that way you can give the person feedback of a state that they were previously unaware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And to just go a little further deeper into this, I think that a lot of our breathing becomes abnormal or inefficient because of these subconscious tensions that I mentioned before initially.
Yes.
So to me, what natural breathing should be like is like, this is your diaphragm, and it should just be like this, like, oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, it goes, yeah. But it's yeah.
There's still a portion of your lungs that expands outwards. And
yeah, it's just like,
but the cyclic nature of it should pretty much be where it doesn't have any stopping points necessarily. Like, I mean, there should be some like maybe resting points of it, like once in a while, but if we have some moment of tension, this is what will happen. So we'll stop there, and we'll literally be stuck there for like 10 seconds
It's
before we start picking up, and then it's like this, and it becomes very erratic, and it's no longer cyclic.
this is something that's super interesting to me, because when you get into is this sort of multi-complex structural like analysis of the diaphragm and the pelvic floor and the multifidus and the TVA, because those things all work together to create some kind of deep core, deep spinal stability. And it's super interesting that if you hypothetically don't breathe right, then you hypothetically probably don't have lumbopelvic stability, meaning you probably have back pain if you don't breathe right. And it's not, maybe you don't, maybe you're on the opposite end of that spectrum, but there are a lot of people who don't breathe well and also have some kind of pain because the muscular structures involved, again, they're atrophying. They're not being used. If your diaphragm isn't ever expanding up or isn't ever expanding out, which is generally a lot of the cases, it's not expanding out and instead your stomach is expanding out, then what muscles do you think are atrophying? The ones that are not being used. And so it gets like this whole complex conversation where just like, I think I've mentioned again before, breathing leads to other, like breathing wrong could lead to so many other problems. And just being able to measure that and give feedback on that is such a powerful thing. You're so, so diaphragm does this as an expansion. A lot of the issue, like whenever all the people I've ever worked with for like this, like people who have tension in their shoulders or lower back headaches, migraines, which by the way, what you're speaking about, there's two models. One model that's more accepted is called myofascial adhesions. It's where like if the muscle doesn't move regularly between the layers, then the layers get stuck together. So if your TVA and we can't use that example, erectus femoris and your psoas major don't ever, like if you're stuck in a sitting position all day, then those muscles flex together and they're not sliding across each other anymore. So then you would actually want to get into a state where they're sliding across each other, and that's where it'd be an adhesion. The second part is biotensegrity, where technically the human body is kind of like this tension and compression structure, where our bones exist, yes, but they're more of a extracellular matrix, right? They're more of a scaffolding. And what we actually need to have a balance of is tension and compression. Compression comes in breathing, and the tension comes in what you talked about. Unfortunately, a lot of people have tension in the wrong places. So that you're supposed to have tension, just in some places you're not supposed to have tension. A lot of people form tension in their traps and their pec minors, their shoulders roll over. And you've seen you've seen some crazy posture, I'm sure. Even scoliosis. You'll see with some people might have an underactive like lat maybe, and their spine is curved all the way to the right side and the left. It's like, if there's a balance of tension and compression, then it speaks to more than just breathing. It speaks to our whole structure in general, where like we're supposed to be at this balance of tension, not like crazy erratic tension over here and crazy erratic tension over here.
Yeah, man. I've also like been very aware of like sometimes my own personal tension / psychological states, and one I can notice from it is whenever I become okay with the situation that I'm in. So like I'm in some stressful situation, something just happened to me, like I'm worried about something. I can already feel my body, right? Like, my breathing is quicker, my heartbeat starts going higher, and my muscles start tensing up, and I'm worried. My jaw starts clenching.
Yep.
But I'm like, all right, in my head, I'm like, all right, what can I do right now? Like, what can be done to resolve whatever situation I'm in? And the first thing that I try to do nowadays is just take in deep breaths, right? And start counteracting that tension that just started building up at that moment. So start relaxing my jaw, start relaxing my shoulders, start just, letting go of that tension that just initially started building up. Because if I don't let it go, it's going to build up and it'll stay there. And if I go out and I start, acting out about and doing things in the world, it won't get resolved. It'll start adding up. So yeah, I think that being able to encounter tough, difficult scenarios in your life and breathe through it and try to relax into it, instead of panicking, worrying more, stressing more, vocalizing fear, putting yourself down or making the situation more negative. I think that that's also what meditation should be about, to help you deal with that stuff. Like you said, people look out into the world for some type of godlike thing. But I think that if God did make us and, he made us in his image, or as they say, we should be able to have everything inside of us to deal with what we have going on.
Oh, again, I would explain that in so many more words. That was so perfect. The way it's definitely, I completely agree. It touches on so many topics. Like the way you explained it, it was much more, there are so many topics wrapped up in that. And I'm going to try my best to really wrap it down. Is like, we need something. We definitely have the tools. We all have the tools. Maybe there are some exceptions. I don't know. Maybe I'm not met enough people in my life to actually say that, but I am pathologically optimistic for humanity. So I believe that we all have the tools. And that means that it's really just about awareness of the tools and the feedback for progress of those tools. And this speaks to two things. Now, a lot of people's approach to that, we'll call it the existentialities or the existential parts of life, is like, religion, maybe philosophy, and meditating falls in sort of in between those two things, I guess, in some context. But it's like what we're dealing with here is, you explained it perfectly. Like whenever I'm about to get into some kind of anxious situation, my palms start to get sweaty, and then my heart rate increases, and then my jaw clenches, and then I'm starting to think, well, what if I say something wrong, or what if this, blah, blah, blah. So that happened to me yesterday. What I did yesterday was I did some breathing exercises for the first time, by the way. I tried it. Yesterday, I normally do the breathing exercises just to practice abdominal control and like that kind of thing. But yesterday, before a call, I sat down for 10 minutes. It was really 8 minutes. And I just practiced on deliberate expansion of the rib cage and deliberate contraction of the rib cage while breathing forcefully. So a forced hyperventilation. And the immediate feedback was as if I just finished sprinting or something. Like I had the tingling in my toes, my nose and my fingertips and everything. And the immediate emotional feeling that I had of the situation I was about to have to go handle disappeared. And it disappeared because, and this is my theory, is because it goes back to our previous podcast last weekend where I talked about the 30% animal, 30% neocortex, meta-human sort of stuff, where our initial reaction to every situation is animal driven. It means that we're going to emotionally react to everything because we don't have a choice. But what we do have a choice is to analyze it from the meta-human neocortex perspective. And that's sort of where meditating comes in. You really begin to develop that secondary reaction of questioning what you're doing whenever you begin to meditate. And it's it's a good thing and a bad thing, I guess. I'm trying to, how to explain that part. It's like you question your own reactions. Whenever someone tells you something and you feel rejected, or you feel like it's something that you would reject or not like, or you feel something that you would love, you kind of question yourself like, ooh, why am I feeling this way towards it? It's not just you feel it with fear, you feel it with everything. If you go you read about some book and you're like, oh, this is great. That's an emotion. You're not experiencing some logic that makes you think that's all of a sudden says this is right. It's about emotion, and it's not a bad thing. It just means that you have to be aware of it. And again, I'm pathologically optimistic for humanity. So, yeah, man, it's just I believe that we all are created with the necessary toolkit. We have been gifted with it in order to face these challenges. But okay, so overall theme is that this is positive because technology is coming to actually interject these states.
Yeah,
okay.
That's exactly it. Yeah, man. And I would say that it's obviously not easy, right? It's obviously not simple, and it's sort of like you said, tools, and they're definitely helpful, but in order to be able to use them and to actually implement them correctly is very difficult. And I guess that's why, people in the past had these crazy ancient wise teachers, right, that would give this information out to others, and people would have to study for years in order to be able to actually benefit from it.
Those people still, there are some groups like that still, and there are some people like that. So this is what I call every now and then, I guess it used to happen a lot more because there's not much science. There's not much, we didn't know about the mechanics of things. And so we only knew about the mechanics of some things. And so it was easier for someone to see a new reality. And that sounds absolutely crazy what I'm saying, but there's a lot higher chance of you seeing something new in the 1600s or 1400s, maybe not you, because I wouldn't have thought like this. I may have been trying to become president or something. I don't know. 400 years ago or whatever, hypothetically, if I was the same as I am now, then I'll be more likely to see some new version of reality with our technology but in order to see that nowadays, you have to go to years of education and years of what we'll call institutionalizing. And this in a way kind of prevents someone from seeing something new. And I don't know if I don't think necessarily it's a bad thing, but you'll see that there are a lot of a lot of these people who did go to these universities, they're creating their own format. They're creating their own, they're doing what you're talking about. There are these ancient wise people who are taking the 20 years, 30 years of experience they have and wrapping it up into a book of sequences to teach you how to do just what they did. And it's overlooked a lot right now, I guess, because, or maybe it's not looked at enough. I don't know, but there are people who are actually doing it. It's just, it's like you're following someone, and that's not accepted. Like that's not something people are completely comfortable with. You know, like they got to be following sort of a company or a brand. To follow these people is a different kind of thing. But anyway.
Yeah. It's also wise, I guess, to acknowledge or be aware of the fact that, there's a delineation of where meditation can apply. So maybe that's what you were trying to refer to before when you were talking about the negative and positive emotions, and sort of like they're both emotions, they're both things that we have to experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel that, for example, if I get my arm cut off right now, right, and it's like bleeding and there's just a stump right here, there's no arm left, I'm not going to start meditating, right? I'm not going to just start meditating and hopefully it'll stop bleeding and it'll stitch itself up and I'll regrow it maybe. That's not what I think meditating is about. I think that meditating is more about learning to deal with the day-to-day things of life that if you don't deal with it adds up and affects you tremendously in the long run. So to me, it's more about dealing with those daily either inconveniences or daily struggles that most people go through. That is part of the human experience. But like obviously, there's always going to be like death and crazy other unseen circumstances that could throw you in for a loop and could throw you down on your knees and make you cry and feel alone or abandoned, all that stuff. That to me is, I understand that. It's not like I'm thinking that, oh, I'm going to meditate and then anything could happen to me and I'll be fine. I don't think that that's the case. But for all these other events, you can control most of the reactions you have to these other daily occurrences that usually might make you seem, I don't know, pissed off or anxious or stressed out. That's where I think meditation can apply more effectively.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I specifically just spoke to the positive and negative emotions in the context that being aware that your immediate reaction to anything that you hear is not logically driven. It is being processed by some emotional barrier, some emotional filter that biases whatever you hear, whatever comes in, and you don't realize it as being biased or that it's emotional until a second later. Or like you might say something you don't mean. This I mean generally in the context of being aware that this is a process that actually occurs. Most people think that they're only like the only, like, it's hard to say, like good emotions can be bad too, is what I'm saying, is that you could have too much of good emotions. And if you're not aware of either, then you could be aware of one side of it. And again, this is a whole nother, like, that's a whole nother spectrum of people, we'll say, a whole nother mindset of people that wouldn't apply to these people who need to deal with the daily, like that kind of thing. I think there's two things that meditating sort of covers. One of those is it's a tool set. It's just this thing you can pull out and use whenever something bad happening or like something daily anxiety, whatever. The other one is that it's actually a mental framework that people spent thousands of years actually developing and their entire lifetimes getting into. And when I say mental framework, I mean, imagine you only saw blue, but these monks saw purple and blue. And you knew that it would take you, like, the only way for you to see this blue color, because this blue color is the most beautiful color or it's the most calming color for you, is for you to actually spend 10 years meditating. It's not that it takes you all this time to build this skill or tool set. It's that it takes all this time to get into this mental framework. And so there's two types of meditating, and one is literally using it as a tool, and the other one is it's a mental framework now. And I personally, I will hope maybe over my lifetime I would get more into the mental framework part of it. Just because I want to be able to cut my arm off and be like, fuck it, I guess we're just gonna go. I mean, not really, obviously, but bro, I'm a lot of my decisions in life have been impulsively, emotionally driven, right? The reason I want to make it a mental framework is because previously I had no awareness of it or control, and it's even the case now. But it's good. Like, I get excited about this kind of stuff. You can tell, like, the way I talk, I'm excited about it. So this is a positive emotion, but there are contexts where this that I'm doing is not a good thing. I'm actually sabotaging myself, and I have to be aware of that. like there are certain group like, and that's like sort of, and that awareness comes from the meditation and comes from this goal. And that's, I don't mean to here's the overall thing is that I feel like a lot of people again rely on these externalities to solve some internal issue, and they first should recognize what is internal and what is external, and then try to solve the internal issue first. And if shit doesn't work with the internal, I mean, no, that's not necessarily true. If you fix the internal enough, then the shit on the outside will start, hopefully, I hope, start changing as well.
I'm with you on that. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's a lot to cover in meditation now, but I'm really interested in this whole feedback thing, or like.
No, I do think that you have a point with the two different ways of going about meditating. So one of them, day-to-day use as a tool, and then another one as an actual framework or way of looking at life, like a philosophy in a sense, where you live it every day, and it's literally what you believe and how you treat everything. Which I think, yeah, man, if I were, to say which one I would prefer, I'd prefer the second one, be able to have some type of superpowers and do some crazy stuff. But yeah, I think for the regular person, the person that's not like us, they're probably more just going to want to stick to the tool usage, which is totally fine as well. Not everybody's going to want the same thing.
It's a gateway, ultimately.
Exactly. And if they're ever curious about going further than just using it as a tool, it's always open to them, and it's always going to be accessible.
So I think man, this is actually a pretty, you want to call it quits here on this? Because I think that we've gotten to a large conclusion on sort of my interpretation of this altogether is that, I guess you and I have the same beliefs in meditating and what its power, like what it could actually do for people. And really the solution, at least the potential solution would be actually giving people feedback on that, on their meditating state, and, or even like getting people to do it. Okay. Before I end the podcast, how do you think that you would get people into meditating without technology? Like, what is the sell point? Is it like, would you tell someone that, like, what would you say to someone to say, hey, like, this is going to, like, try sitting still, try meditate, what would that be? Without technology.
Without technology.
It's going to be an easy sell for technology, I think.
Yeah, technology makes it a lot easier. I think that without it, you would have to really have, it might not even be about the actual, like, outcome of it. It might just be up to, like, having a great personality and being charismatic enough to, like, I don't know, get people to join you in your quest for sitting still. And just make sitting still the thing,
Quest for sitting still. Listen, guys, my name's Ryan. I have a vision of the future. All we have to do is sit still, increasingly longer as the years progress. And at some point, we're going to hit, man, that would be so crazy.
We'll hit critical consciousness, and then God will come down.
That's where we get back into the cult conversation and the like the thought leader conversation. Okay, so the only way to stop meditating is to have a religion or with technology.
Yeah, we just get like Cardi B or something to sit, and everyone will follow her in suit. That's it, we're done. But she'll never sit still. So
I always wonder what power, so like how much could someone commit themselves to a philosophy, and how much would it impact the world if they did? So like one of my goals is to commit myself to this framework, to this mental philosophy of this movement, and not just movement and stillness. We'll call it the dichotomy between movement and stillness. And like my goal is like what podcast obviously is talking about it is sort of like, I guess us talking about it kind of is fulfilling that goal in a way, right? Like we talk about every time, just by us talking about it, kind of like, again, mine is to commit myself to this philosophy where it's like, we could all improve, we could all do better. And it's generally we just need to be made aware of the problem, and then aware of the tool set. And then like maybe giving some feedback on it. And that, like that would have, like that, the effects would be so resounding. And you've seen it, I guess, you've seen it many times, and like Wim Hof is an example. He is a prime example of a methodology that he passionately shared so much, and actually proved to the point, like he was so confident, and he had actually achieved this level of, like, he knew what he'd accomplished before he even had the studies done. Like that's right. He knew he increased his body temperature before the studies were even done. And so it's like, these people already exist. It's just like they're generally, people interpret them as crazy, or Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, man.
All right, man. So we're that's the end of this one. You want to give the final comments, Lou?
Yeah, I think that it's a skill, man. It's a skill to be able to sit down, relax, and put aside whatever's going on to focus on something else. But I think it's also uh, beneficial. I think that for some reason, like you just said right now, something interesting, that dichotomy between movement and staying still. It's such a crazy thing that, to be healthy, you need to move, but you can't be moving all the time. There has to be a time where you also sit down and relax. So yeah, man, it's interesting that those two things are actually what is coming out of this project that is Exoderma. So
Yes.
that's really cool, man.
He said it perfectly. Guys, if you have any, I don't know, no one's really listening to us, but if you are hypothetically listening to us at this point, go
In the
ahead.
future, in 2029.
In 9 years. I think we might get some listeners by probably like 50 episodes or something. That's generally what it happens around. At least when I say it, I mean like we've gotten to this is past podcast. All right, guys, thank you for listening. If you have any comments, go ahead and let us know. Take it easy.
Peace out.
Peace out, guys.